My boyfriend faked his own death and framed me for theft, so I sent him packing. 2 years later, he showed up outside my college dorm, watching my every move. I was in the middle of texting my friends the road work ahead vine during math class when the principal coughed over the school intercom, the telltale sign that he was about to make an announcement. Attention all students and staff, no one is to leave their classrooms. Everyone must remain seated until further notice. This is for your safety as much as ours. Usually no one gave an F what the teacher said, but now it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Even Mrs. Peterson stopped writing on the board mid-sentence. We heard ambulances outside, and she told us to sit in our seats. We were all glancing at each other around the room, wide-eyed and curious. Nobody said anything, but we were all thinking the same thing. One of the teachers had died. The red and blue lights flashed across the walls, and we heard screams from the other grades echoing throughout the building. Mrs. Peterson told us that it wasn't a big deal, and we should all be focusing on our studies, but she could barely get the words out from how hard she was hyperventilating. So much so that she didn't even care as we all started to take our phones out and text our theories into the Snapchat group chat about what was going down. Then we heard it. Footsteps running past our door. Heavy ones. Multiple sets. I couldn't help myself. I had to look. I crept to the door and peeked through the window. 2 paramedics were sprinting down the hall pushing a wheeled stretcher, the kind you see on medical shows when someone's heart stops. "Get away from the door, Eve," Mrs. Peterson whispered, voice shaking. She was scared too. I sat down and immediately texted everyone what I had seen. Suddenly people's bitmojis were popping up faster than a whack-a-mole game. Maybe someone finally took out Mr. Jordan, the creepy history teacher. Nah, someone definitely just had an allergic reaction. Peanut allergies go crazy. Another one said that maybe someone had taken too much Fent. Mrs. Peterson tried to continue the lesson. Something about the Revolutionary War, but nobody was listening. How could we care about some battle from 200 years ago when someone might be dying down the hall right now? Finally, there was a knock at the door. It was the principal, standing beside a police officer. "Eve O'Brien," the principal announced. My heart dropped. That was me. "Can you come with us, please? Bring your things." I silently got up and followed, not knowing what the F was going on. In the hallway, I could see the paramedics near the gym. One was sitting on the floor filling out paperwork. The stretcher was off to the side. When they brought me into the office, I was faced with my parents sitting on the wooden chairs. Well, my parents are divorced and I hadn't seen them sit in the same room since I was 7. So now I was really confused. Suddenly my mom stood up and lunged at me for a hug. "I'm so sorry," she repeated over and over. I pushed her off of me. "Guys, it's okay. I mean, the teacher dying is sad for all of us, but..." I was then interrupted by the sound of my father, the epitome of macho and stoic, bursting into tears. "Honey, it wasn't a teacher," is the only sentence he managed to get out. She told me my boyfriend Alvin had died. I pushed her off of me. What kind of effing sick joke is this? I just saw him last night. Anger boiled my blood. I knew my parents were messy, but I didn't think they were monsters. Neither of them said anything in response, but their eyes were filled with a deep sense of pity. My dad was the one to break the silence. "Honey, his dad called him down to have breakfast with his family, and when he didn't come down, they went to his bedroom and he wasn't there. So they walked up to his attic and the door wouldn't open. Turns out it was stuck on his body. He had committed rope." He then burst into tears again. I grabbed my VP from my pocket, not even caring that the principal was standing right there. I told them they were lying, that I had seen the stretcher and the screams. Turns out they were going to call me into the office on the intercom, but suddenly the janitor fell and broke his hip, so saving him was first priority. I looked back at my mom and saw her entire body trembling like I'd never seen before. I stuffed my mouth with the sleeve of my hoodie and screamed as hard as I could. My knees gave out under me, and the pain felt so grounding that I continued to bang my head against the floor, over and over. My parents picked me up and carried me to the backseat of the car, getting ready to drive me home, and that's when I got the text. It was Alvin. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. The notification said Alvin clear as day, with his contact photo, a selfie we'd taken at the beach last summer. I clicked on it and there was a YouTube link. My mom was in the front seat crying while my dad drove, neither of them speaking. The only sound was the windshield wipers scraping against the glass. It had started raining. Neither of them noticed me staring at my screen in complete shock. I clicked the link and waited for it to load, watching the buffering circle spin around and around. The video started playing and there he was, Alvin, sitting in what looked like some old cabin with wood paneling on the walls. He looked terrible. His face was all bruised up and his lip was split, dried blood crusted in the corner. His left eye was swollen almost shut. He started talking and I had to turn the volume down so my parents wouldn't hear. His voice was hoarse like he'd been crying. He said he was sorry for scaring me, but he had to run away. His dad had been beating him for years and last night was the worst it had ever been. He lifted his shirt and I gasped. His ribs were covered in purple and yellow bruises. He showed the camera his arms and they were covered in bruises too. Some looked fresh and angry red. Some looked old and faded to green. There were scars I'd never seen before, hidden under his long sleeves all this time. He said his dad found his empty room this morning and immediately called 911 saying he killed himself. Alvin said his dad did it to cover up all the abuse in case anyone started asking questions. He said he'd been planning this escape for months, saving money from his part-time job and finding this cabin through a friend of a friend. The video ended with him saying he was safe now and would text me an address where I could find him. He looked directly at the camera and said, "I love you, Eve. I'm sorry." Then the screen went black. I sat there staring at my phone, not knowing what to think. My boyfriend was alive, but he let everyone think he was dead. My mom turned around and saw me looking at my phone, her tear-stained face suddenly alert. She reached back and grabbed it from me before I could react. I tried to tell her about the video, but she wouldn't listen. She said some kids at school were probably playing a cruel prank on me, that people could be horrible when tragedy struck. She said I was in denial and needed to accept what happened. My dad agreed with her, glancing at me in the rearview mirror with those same pitying eyes. They took me home and my mom kept my phone. She said I needed time to process everything without distractions. I spent the rest of the day in my room pretending to sleep, but really I was planning how to get my phone back. I needed to see that address Alvin mentioned. I needed to know if this was real or if I was losing my mind. That night I waited until I heard my parents go to bed. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then I snuck downstairs, avoiding the creaky step third from the bottom, and found my phone charging on the kitchen counter. Sure enough, there was another text from Alvin. It was an address for some cabin about an hour away, somewhere near the state forest. He said to come alone and not tell anyone. He said he'd explain everything when I got there. Part of me knew this was crazy, but I had to know the truth. I went back to my room and opened my window, the cool night air hitting my face. We lived in a one-story house, so it was easy to climb out. I grabbed my bike from the garage, careful not to knock over any of the garden tools, and started pedaling. The whole ride there, I kept thinking about that video. Those bruises looked so real, and Alvin's face looked genuinely scared, not like he was acting. The night was dark, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty roads as I pedaled harder, desperate to find out if the boy I loved was really alive. The ride took forever. My legs were burning like fire, and I had to stop twice to catch my breath, leaning over my handlebars and gasping in the cold night air. The forest road was pitch black, darker than anything I'd ever experienced, and I only had my phone flashlight to see. The narrow beam barely cut through the darkness, illuminating just a few feet of cracked asphalt ahead. Every shadow looked like something waiting to jump out at me. Finally, I saw the cabin up ahead, a small light glowing in one window like a beacon. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode right through my chest. I left my bike by a large oak tree and walked up to the door, my sneakers crunching on dead leaves. Before I could knock, it opened, and there was Alvin. He looked even worse than in the video. The bruises on his face had turned darker purple and green, spreading across his left cheek like spilled paint. His right eye was nearly swollen shut. He pulled me inside quickly and locked the door behind us, sliding the deadbolt with shaking hands. I wanted to hug him, but something felt off. He was acting jumpy and kept looking out the window, pulling back the raggedy curtain every few seconds. The cabin was small and smelled like mold and something else. else. Fear, maybe. There was a sleeping bag in the corner and some canned food on a rickety table that looked like it might collapse at any moment. He told me to sit down and started talking really fast, words tumbling over each other. He said his dad had been hitting him since he was little. Started with slaps when he got bad grades, then punches when he talked back. Last night his dad threw him down the stairs because he forgot to take out the trash. He said he couldn't take it anymore and had to run. I asked why he didn't just tell someone. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and broken. He said his dad was respected in town, coached Little League and went to church every Sunday, shaking hands with everyone after service. Nobody would believe him. Plus his dad always threatened to call him if he ever told anyone. He lifted his shirt and showed me more bruises on his back and legs. Some looked like belt marks, long and thin. Others were round, like from fists. I felt sick to my stomach. All those times he wore long sleeves in summer, saying he was cold. All those times he said he fell off his skateboard or walked into a door. I should have known something was wrong. The signs were all there. Then he dropped the bomb. He said he'd been stealing money from his dad's hardware store for months. Just small amounts from the register that wouldn't be noticed. 20 here, 30 there. He needed it to run away, to survive on his own. But here's the messed up part. He put my name on some fake receipts. Said I was helping with inventory after school, getting paid under the table. I told him that was insane. Why would he do that? He said he needed insurance. If his dad ever found out about the missing money, he could blame it on me. That way his dad wouldn't hit him as bad. Maybe just yell instead of using his fists. I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm enough to make me stop. His fingers felt desperate. He said I couldn't go yet. He needed me to understand. His whole plan wasn't finished. He was going to lay low for a few days, let the bruises photograph better, then contact the police about the abuse. But he needed those receipts as leverage against his dad. If his dad tried to deny the abuse, Alvin would threaten to expose the theft and say his dad made him do it. The logic was twisted, but I could see how it made sense to him. I told him this was crazy. Using me like that wasn't okay. He started crying and saying he was sorry, tears mixing with the dried blood on his face, that he never meant to hurt me. He just didn't know what else to do. He'd been planning this for so long, and I was the only person he trusted. I tried to leave again, but then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My bike tires were flat, both of them. I asked what happened to my bike, trying to keep my voice steady. He said it must have been a coincidence. Maybe I ran over some glass on the way here, but I knew he was lying. His eyes wouldn't meet mine, darting around the room instead. I told him to let me use his phone to call someone. He said he threw it away so his dad couldn't track him. Dropped it in the river on his way here. This was getting scary. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere with no way to leave. He kept saying I just needed to stay for a little while, until he figured out his next move. He promised he'd make it right, fix my bike in the morning. But the way he was acting reminded me of something. The way he was trying to control the situation, making excuses, apologizing, then doing it again. It was just like how he described his dad. I pretended to calm down and said I understood. I sat back down on the creaky wooden chair and asked him to tell me more about his plan. While he talked, I looked around the cabin for anything useful. There was an old landline phone on the wall, but when I asked about it, he said it was disconnected years ago. He had answers for everything. He'd clearly thought this through, probably spent hours planning every detail. He showed me a notebook where he'd been writing down all the times his dad hurt him. Dates, descriptions, everything in his neat handwriting. June 3rd, belt, 10 strikes. July 19th, punched in stomach, couldn't breathe. The list went on for pages. He also showed me copies of the fake receipts with my name on them. My signature was forged pretty well, good enough to fool someone who didn't look too close. He'd been practicing. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, my back aching from the hardwood. Alvin had given me the sleeping bag, and he slept sitting up in a chair by the door, like he was guarding it, or guarding me. I said I needed to use the bathroom, and he pointed to an outhouse outside. He followed me there and waited right outside, humming nervously. I could see his shadow through the gaps in the wood. On the way back, I saw a path leading deeper into the woods, barely visible through the undergrowth. I memorized where it was, counting the trees. Back inside, I pretended to be on his side. I said I wanted to help him get justice against his dad. His face lit up like Christmas morning, and he hugged me tight. It felt wrong. This wasn't the Alvin I knew. Or maybe it was, and I just never saw this side of him. He started telling me more details about the abuse, how his dad would make him stand in the corner for hours until his legs shook, how he'd take away food as punishment, sometimes for days, how he'd lock him in the basement with no light, just the sound of mice scratching in the walls. Each story was worse than the last. I believed him. The bruises were proof enough, but that didn't make what he was doing to me okay. He was so focused on his own pain that he couldn't see he was hurting me too. When he went to the outhouse, I quickly looked through his stuff. I found his journal and flipped through it. The abuse stories were all there, written in heartbreaking detail. But so was his plan to frame me. He'd been planning it for months, every step calculated, which receipts to forge, how to get me here, how to keep me here. I also found something else tucked under a pile of dirty clothes, his phone. It wasn't thrown away like he said. It was hidden with the battery removed. I quickly put the battery back in and turned it on, my hands trembling. There were dozens of messages from his dad, not worried messages like you'd expect from a parent whose kid went missing. These were threats, telling Alvin to come home or else, saying he'd find him no matter where he hid, that he knew all his hiding spots. The last message made my blood run cold. It said he knew about the missing money and the receipts. He knew about me. He was coming. I heard Alvin coming back and quickly hid the phone again, my heart racing. That afternoon, Alvin got more paranoid. He kept checking the windows and jumping at every sound, a branch cracking, a bird calling. He said his dad was smart and might figure out where he was. The cabin belonged to his uncle who lived out of state. His dad knew about it. They'd come here for a family reunion once. I suggested we go to the police right away, but he said no. He needed more time to prepare, to make sure his story was perfect, to let the bruises develop more. I realized he was stalling. Part of him was terrified of confronting his dad even through the police. The abuse had messed him up so bad he couldn't think straight. He was like a rabbit frozen in headlights. I told him I was hungry and we were running low on food. Just some stale crackers and a can of beans left. I suggested I bike to the nearest store to get supplies. He laughed and reminded me about my flat tires. He said he'd go instead and I should stay here where it was safe. Lock the door and don't answer for anyone. I knew this was my chance. As soon as he left, I grabbed his phone and called 911, but the battery died before I could say anything. Just 3 beeps and black screen. I searched everywhere for a charger but couldn't find one. Then I remembered the path in the woods. Maybe it led to a road or another cabin. I had to try something. I started down the path, moving as fast as I could without making too much noise. The woods were thick and branches kept scratching my arms, leaving thin red lines. Spider webs caught in my hair. After about 10 minutes, I heard a car engine. I ran toward the sound and came out on a dirt road, but my heart sank when I saw who it was. Alvin's dad in his big black pickup truck. He was driving slow, looking into the woods like he was searching for something, or someone. His face looked angry even from a distance. I ducked behind a tree and held my breath, pressing myself against the rough bark. He drove past without seeing me. I waited until I couldn't hear the engine anymore, then started walking down the road in the opposite direction. I'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I heard another car. This time I hid before looking, crouching in some bushes. It was Alvin in some hit-up truck I'd never seen before. Rust covered the doors and the muffler was hanging low. He must have had it stashed somewhere. He was driving fast, looking panicked, gripping the wheel with white knuckles. I stayed hidden until he passed. Now I was really scared. Both of them were out here looking for me. I kept walking, staying close to the tree line so I could hide if needed. My legs were tired and my throat was dry. Finally, I saw a house up ahead. Smoke was coming from the chimney and there were flowers in the window. Civilization. I ran to the door and knocked frantically. An old woman answered, wearing a flower-covered apron. I must have looked crazy because she took a step back, her hand going to her chest. I told her I needed to use her phone. It was an emergency. She looked me up and down, saw the scratches, the leaves in my hair, the desperation in my eyes, and let me in. Her kitchen smelled like fresh bread. She pointed to an ancient rotary phone on the wall. I called my parents first. My mom answered on the first ring, sobbing. She said they'd been looking for me all night. The police were involved. Everyone thought I'd done something stupid because of Alvin. I told her I was okay and where I was. Kind of. I didn't actually know the address. The old woman helped me figure it out, pointing to mail on her counter. My mom said they were coming to get me right away. Then I called the police and told them about Alvin, where the cabin was, that he was alive but needed help. The old woman made me chamomile tea while I waited. She said kids came through here sometimes running from something. She never asked questions, just helped how she could. She gave me some homemade cookies and a warm washcloth for my scratches. About 30 minutes later, I heard cars pulling up, lots of them. My parents burst through the door and hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. My mom was crying. My dad kept saying my name over and over. There were 2 police officers with them. They asked me a million questions. I told them everything. About the video, the cabin, the bruises, the fake receipts. One officer stayed with us while the other went to find the cabin. We waited for what felt like hours. The old woman made more tea and my mom held my hand the whole time. Finally, the officer's radio crackled. They'd found the cabin, but it was empty. No sign of Alvin. But they found his journal and the receipts. Evidence of both the abuse and the fraud. They put out an alert for both Alvin and his dad. The officer said they'd need me to come to the station to give a full statement. My parents drove me there, holding my hand the whole way. I watched familiar streets pass by and felt like I'd been gone for years instead of just one night. At the station, I told the whole story again, this time to a detective who recorded everything. While I was there, they got a call. A traffic camera had spotted the truck Alvin was driving. He was heading back toward town. They sent units to intercept him. About an hour later, they brought him in. He looked defeated. All the fight had gone out of him. His shoulders were slumped and he was staring at the ground. He saw me through the window of the interview room and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what to feel. Angry, sad, relieved, maybe all of them at once. The detective said they'd also picked up his dad at the house. He was hammered and had started swinging at the officers. Now they were both in custody. Over the next few days, the whole story came out. Other kids came forward saying they'd seen Alvin with bruises over the years. Teachers admitted they'd had suspicions, but no proof. The hardware store's books showed the missing money, the fake receipts with my forged signature. Alvin's journal documented years of abuse in heartbreaking detail, but it also showed how that abuse had twisted him, how he'd learned to manipulate and control from his dad, how he justified hurting me because he'd been hurt worse. The prosecutor said they had enough evidence to charge both of them. Alvin's dad for child abuse and filing a false police report, Alvin for fraud, forgery, and false imprisonment, keeping me at that cabin against my will. But they were considering Alvin's circumstances. The years of abuse were mitigating factors. He'd probably get counseling and community service instead of jail time. His dad was looking at serious prison time though. Turns out this wasn't his first violent offense. I had to testify at a hearing, not a full trial because they both ended up taking plea deals. Seeing Alvin in court was hard. He looked smaller somehow, broken. His lawyer read a statement where he apologized to everyone, especially me. He said the abuse had messed up his sense of right and wrong. He thought hurting others was normal because it's all he'd known, but he was getting help now and wanted to do better. His dad didn't apologize, just sat there glaring at everyone like this was our fault. After it was all over, I started seeing a counselor too, to process everything that happened. She helped me understand that trauma could make people do terrible things, but it didn't excuse those things. Alvin was a victim, but he'd also made me a victim. Both things could be true at the same time. She also helped me recognize warning signs I'd missed. The controlling behavior, the manipulation, the way he'd isolated me at that cabin, all red flags I might see sooner next time. I started a support group at school for students dealing with toxic relationships, whether romantic, family, or friendships. We met every week in the guidance counselor's office. More kids showed up than I expected. Turns out a lot of people were dealing with stuff like this but didn't know how to talk about it. We shared stories and resources, learned about healthy boundaries, how to spot manipulation, when to ask for help. The guidance counselor said it was one of the most important programs the school had. Alvin wrote me a letter from the facility where he was getting treatment. I didn't open it for weeks. When I finally did, it was mostly more apologies. He said he was learning about cycles of abuse, how victims often become abusers themselves if they don't get help. He was determined to break that cycle. He thanked me for exposing everything, even though it hurt at the time. He said I might have saved his life, and maybe other people's lives too. I didn't write back. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. His dad got 5 years in prison. The judge said he showed no remorse and posed a danger to society. When he gets out, he'll have to stay away from Alvin and complete anger management. Alvin got 2 years probation and mandatory therapy. He had to pay back the stolen money too. Last I heard, he was living with his uncle out of state and working at a grocery store, taking online classes to finish high school, trying to build a life that didn't revolve around violence and fear. The whole thing taught me that hurt people, but it also taught me that everyone has a choice. Alvin chose to drag me into his escape plan instead of just asking for help. He chose to forge those receipts and flatten my bike tires. His trauma explained those choices but didn't excuse them. I had to learn to forgive him for my own peace of mind. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or letting him back in my life. It just meant letting go of the anger so it didn't poison me too. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that cabin, about feeling trapped with no way out. But then I remember that I did get out. I found a way, and now I help other kids find their way out too. The support group has grown. We even got some funding from the school board to bring in guest speakers, experts on domestic violence and emotional abuse, former victims who survived and thrived. We're making a difference, one story at a time. Looking back, the scariest part wasn't the cabin or the flat tires or even the forged receipts. It was how normal Alvin seemed for so long, how well he hid his pain and his plans. It made me realize that we never really know what someone's going through, what battles they're fighting, what choices they're making in desperation. All we can do is pay attention, trust our instincts when something feels off, and never be afraid to ask for help, because staying silent helps no one, not the victims, not the abusers, not the people caught in between. That's why I'm sharing this story, not for sympathy or attention, but because someone reading this might be in a similar situation, either being abused or being manipulated by someone who is abused. Either way, you need to know that it's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix someone else's trauma. You can have compassion for what they've been through while still protecting yourself from what they might do. That's not selfish, that's survival. And sometimes survival is the best thing you can do for everyone involved. The support group kept growing, and we even got some local news coverage. Not like national headlines or anything crazy, just a small piece in the town paper about teens helping teens. That's when things got weird again. I got a Facebook message from someone named Cameron saying they knew Alvin from the treatment facility. They said he wasn't doing as well as everyone thought, still manipulating people, just better at hiding it now. I showed the message to my counselor, and she said to be careful. Could be true, could be someone trying to stir up drama. Then more messages started coming. This Cameron person said Alvin was planning something, that he talked about me all the time in group therapy. Not in a healing way, but in an obsessive way, like he blamed me for everything that went wrong. I screenshot everything and took it to the police detective who handled our case. He said they'd look into it, but without specific threats, there wasn't much they could do. Alvin was allowed to talk about me in therapy. That was kind of the point of therapy. A week later, I was walking home from school when I saw a familiar truck parked outside my house. That same rusty one Alvin had been driving in the woods. My heart started racing and I ducked behind my neighbor's hedge. I called my mom and told her not to come outside. Then I called 911 and reported a suspicious vehicle. While I waited for the cops, I watched the truck. Nobody was inside that I could see. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Lots of people drove old trucks. The police showed up and ran the plates. It wasn't registered to Alvin. Belonged to some guy named Dennis who lived 2 towns over. They knocked on his door and it turned out he'd sold the truck months ago to some kid paying cash. No paperwork, just a handshake deal. The description matched Alvin, but the kid had given a fake name. The cops said they'd increase patrols around my house and school. My parents installed security cameras that night. Dad stayed home from work the next day just to make sure I was safe. Nothing happened for a few days and I started to relax. Maybe Cameron was wrong. Maybe the truck was just a weird coincidence. Then Thursday after school, I was waiting for my mom to pick me up when I saw him. Alvin, standing across the street from school wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like that was enough of a disguise. He was just watching the doors, hands in his pockets. I immediately went back inside and found the security guard. By the time we got back outside, he was gone. The security footage showed him clearly though. He'd been there for an hour before I spotted him. just standing and watching. The police said it was a violation of his probation to come near me or the school. They put out a warrant for his arrest. His probation officer hadn't heard from him in weeks. He'd stopped showing up for mandatory therapy sessions. His uncle said he'd moved out one night without saying anything, just packed a bag and left. Now nobody knew where he was staying. My parents wanted to pull me out of school until they found him, but I had finals coming up and the support group needed me. We compromised. Mom or dad would drive me to and from school. No walking alone, no going out with friends unless they knew exactly where I was. I had to text them every hour. It sucked, but I understood why. The security cameras at home picked up someone in our yard twice that week. Too dark to see clearly, but the build looked right. Then Brittany from my support group came to me with something scary. She said a new guy had joined their online trauma forum, called himself Survivor No More, and his story sounded exactly like Alvin's. Abusive dad, running away, girlfriend who betrayed him, but in his version, the girlfriend was the villain who ruined his life for no reason. He was getting lots of sympathy from other members who didn't know the real story. Some were even offering to help him get justice. Brittany had screenshot everything before blocking him. I took it all to the detective again. He said they were taking it seriously now. This was escalating from violation of probation to potential stalking charges. They were working with other departments to track him down. His dad was still in prison, so at least we didn't have to worry about both of them. But Alvin had learned a lot from his dad about how to intimidate people, how to make them feel watched and unsafe without technically doing anything illegal, until showing up at school anyway. My counselor suggested I write him a letter, not to send, just to get my feelings out. I wrote 10 pages about how betrayed I felt, how he'd turned his pain into my pain, how I'd loved him and wanted to help him, but he'd made that impossible. I burned it in the backyard fire pit and watched the smoke rise up and disappear. It felt good, like releasing something heavy I'd been carrying. Mom made hot chocolate and we sat outside until the fire died down. The next Monday, Cameron messaged me again, this time with a photo from inside the treatment facility. It showed Alvin's room with maps on the wall, red circles around my house, my school, places I went regularly, the coffee shop where I studied, the park where I jogged, the movie theater where I worked weekends. Cameron said they'd found it after Alvin left and reported it to staff, but by then he was already gone. The facility had dropped the ball big time not watching him closer. That's when my parents made the decision. We were staying with my aunt in the next state until they caught him. I didn't want to run away like some scared little kid, but the maps changed everything. He'd been planning this for who knows how long, studying my routines. I packed a bag and we left that night. Told the school I had a family emergency. Only my closest friends knew the truth. The support group would have to manage without me for a while. My aunt lived in a gated community with security guards and cameras everywhere. It felt like overkill, but also kind of safe. I did my schoolwork online and video called into support group meetings. Life felt weirdly normal and completely wrong at the same time, like I was in witness protection or something. Every time a car drove by too slow or someone looked at me too long at the grocery store, my heart would race. I hated that he'd made me so paranoid. 2 weeks into our stay, the detective called with news. They'd caught him. He was sleeping in his truck in a parking garage one town over from mine. Had a notebook full of my schedule and photos of me he'd taken with a long lens camera. Hundreds of them. Me at school, at work, even through my bedroom window. They also found a knife and rope in his truck. He said they were for camping, but nobody believed that. He was being held without bail this time. We went home the next day, but things felt different. The house didn't feel as safe anymore. I kept checking the locks and looking out windows. My parents understood. Dad installed an alarm system to go with the cameras. Mom signed me up for self-defense classes. Not because we thought Alvin would get out, but because feeling prepared helped with the fear. The instructor said I was a natural. Turns out all that anger had to go somewhere. The new charges were serious. Stalking, violation of probation, possession of weapons. His lawyer tried to play the abuse card again, but the judge wasn't having it. Said Alvin had been given a second chance and thrown it away. The photos especially creeped everyone out. Some were from before he ran away the first time. He'd been watching me for months without me knowing, following me around town, learning my patterns. The detective said it was one of the worst stalking cases he'd seen. This time I didn't go to court. My victim impact statement was read by the prosecutor instead. I wrote about how he'd stolen my sense of safety, how I jumped at shadows now, how I'd had to leave my home because of his obsession, but I also wrote about the support group and how we were helping other kids, how I wouldn't let his actions define my life. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in actual prison this time, with mandatory psychiatric treatment and a permanent restraining order when he got out. His dad actually wrote me a letter from prison. Not an apology exactly, but close. He said he'd been thinking about how his violence had created more violence, how Alvin had learned from him that hurting people was how you dealt with problems. He was in therapy too now, court-ordered but still. He said he hoped I could move on and have a good life, that I deserved better than getting caught up in their family mess. I didn't write back, but I kept the letter. Proof that people could change, maybe. The support group threw me a welcome back party when I returned to regular meetings. They'd made a banner and everything. We had twice as many members now, kids who'd heard about what happened and realized they needed help too. Some were being abused at home, some were in controlling relationships, some were dealing with bullying that had gone too far. We all had different stories, but the same need to be heard and believed, to know we weren't alone or crazy. I graduated high school with decent grades despite everything. Got into a state college about 3 hours away, far enough to feel like a fresh start, but close enough to come home on weekends. My parents helped me move into the dorms. Dad triple-checked all the locks and mom made friends with the campus security office. I rolled my eyes but secretly appreciated it. They'd been through a lot too. Watching your kid get stalked by someone you'd welcomed into your home had to be rough. College was good for me. Nobody knew my story unless I told them. I could just be Eve, not Eve who survived that crazy thing. I studied psychology because understanding why people did what they did felt important now. My professor said I had good instincts for it, probably from lived experience, though I didn't tell them that. I started a new support group on campus. Turned out lots of college kids needed that kind of help too. Junior year, I got a notification that made my blood run cold. Alvin was being released early for good behavior, 2 years instead of 3. The restraining order was still in effect, but paper doesn't stop someone who's determined. I called the detective who'd handled my case. He was retired now, but remembered everything. Said to trust my instincts and call 911 if anything felt off. The prison was supposed to notify me when he actually got out, but sometimes wires got crossed. I spent the next few weeks jumpy as hell. Every unfamiliar face on campus could be him. Every wrong number phone call made me panic. My roommate Julia thought I was losing it until I explained everything. Then she got protective too. Started walking me to classes and checking in constantly. It was annoying but sweet. Good to have people who cared. The campus security knew about the situation too. They had his photo and would patrol extra around my dorm. Then one day I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "Please read." My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. It was from Alvin's uncle. He said Alvin had been released but immediately checked himself into a long-term psychiatric facility. Voluntary commitment. He'd finally accepted that he needed serious help. Years of it, not just a few months. The uncle wanted me to know so I wouldn't spend my life looking over my shoulder. He said Alvin had signed papers giving up his right to leave for at least 5 years. I wanted to believe it, but trust was hard. I forwarded the email to my old detective friend. He made some calls and confirmed it was true. The facility was legit, specializing in trauma-based personality disorders. Alvin had signed himself in the day he got out. Told the intake counselor he was afraid of what he might do if left on his own. That level of self-awareness was new. Maybe the prison therapy had actually helped, or maybe he just got tired of ruining his own life. I still stayed careful, but the constant fear faded a bit. Finished college with honors and got into grad school for clinical psychology. Specialized in trauma and abuse recovery. My thesis advisor said my personal experience gave me unique insights, but warned against letting it consume my career. Good advice. I needed balance. Started dating a guy named Noah for my research methods class. Told him the whole story on our 3rd date. He didn't run away screaming, so that was good. The campus support group had become an official program by then with actual funding and a real office. I trained other students to run it before I graduated. Watching it grow beyond what I could do alone felt amazing. Like something good had come from all the bad. They gave me a plaque at the end of your ceremony. Founder and guardian angel, it said. Cheesy, but I cried anyway. My parents were there beaming with pride. They'd come so far too from that terrified couple in the principal's office. Got my doctorate and started working at a treatment center for at-risk youth. Kids who'd been abused or were showing signs of becoming abusers themselves. The cycle could be broken, but it took work. Constant, difficult work. Some days were harder than others. Some kids reminded me too much of Alvin. That same mix of pain and anger looking for a target. But most were just hurt and scared and needed someone to believe them, to show them another way existed. 5 years after he checked himself in, I got another email from Alvin's uncle. Said Alvin was doing well. Still in treatment, but in a transitional program now. Had a job at the facility doing maintenance. Was taking online college courses. The uncle thought I should know he was getting better. Really better this time. I appreciated the update, but didn't need more than that. His journey was his own now. Mine had taken a different path, and that was okay. Sometimes new members of support groups I speak at ask if I forgave him. It's complicated. I forgave the broken kid who'd been struck by his father until he didn't know right from wrong, but I couldn't forget the calculating person who forged those receipts and stalked me with a camera. Both existed in the same person. That's what trauma does sometimes. Creates these fractured selves that war with each other. The victim and the perpetrator all tangled up inside. My life now is pretty normal. Married Noah last spring in a small ceremony. Still working with troubled kids and running support groups. Still checking locks more than most people, but not living in fear. Alvin becomes less real every year. More like a story that happened to someone else. Except when I'm helping a kid who reminds me of him. Then it all comes flooding back. But that's useful. Keeps me sharp. Reminds me why this work matters. Why one person reaching out can change everything. The last I heard, Alvin was living in a halfway house and working full time. Still in therapy, but stable. His dad got out of prison and immediately violated parole by getting in a bar fight. Back inside now for another few years. Some people change and some don't. That's just reality. All we can control is our own choices, our own healing, our own decision to help or harm. Every day we wake up and choose again. That's the real work. Not the dramatic moments, but the daily choice to do better than was done to us. My story could have ended so many different ways. If that old woman hadn't let me use her phone. If the police hadn't taken me seriously. If Alvin had been a little more desperate or a little less scared. But it ended with me here, helping other kids find their way out of darkness. Not perfect, still carrying scars, but proof that survival is possible. That cycles can be broken. That hurt people don't have to hurt people. They can choose another way. It just takes one person believing that to start.